Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me and had a good lunch after a very long and interesting morning and early afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of our esteemed guests, panelists, and colleagues, and thank you again to the Turkish Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, the General Directorate of Forestry, and the World Bank for hosting us the last 2 days. My name is Natalie Çilem. I am leading the wildfire resilience work at the World Economic Forum. It's a privilege to moderate today's final session on collaboration for forest fire management. Over the past 2 days, many of you have highlighted the growing wildfire crisis from all around the world, from Korea to Turkey, to neighboring countries, and really I think it's been an incredibly interesting set of conversations with an exceptional group of experts and global leaders and technicians and with regional insights. So I'll begin with a few reflections and an overview of the roadmap ahead for the work we're doing at the forum before I move into our presentations. So again, as many of you have outlined over the last 2 days, the statistics around wildfires are staggering. They are fast-growing, leading to record forest loss, soaring economic damages, and destabilizing communities around the world. In response to this, the World Economic Forum has recently launched our Global Wildfire Leadership Network, which is launched under our 1 Trillion Trees initiative as part of our Center for Nature and Climate. My colleague Daniel earlier mentioned that the World Economic Forum is the international organization for public and private partnerships. So really the work that we do is about collaboration. And so I'm very excited to be here today to have this discussion. So the work of the network is designed really to accelerate just that, cross-sector collaboration in order to catalyze investment and action around wildfire resilience. Our mission is really rooted in the idea that bringing together multiple stakeholder groups from around the world can help us to find the best solutions and take the best action on wildfire resilience. And this is, again, the work that we do at the forum across lots of different issue areas. I will provide a slide deck, but for the sake of time, I wanted to skip it today. But maybe very briefly, I'll go through just a few of the activities that we're doing. So first, next month, we're launching a series of working groups. So we will have 4 working groups. My colleague Daniel, who you heard from earlier, will help to co-lead our insurance and financing mechanisms working group. We'll have another working group on tech and data governance, another group on nature-based solutions and innovation, and finally one on community action and coordination. The idea of these working groups is that they will really feed into 2 knowledge products that we'll put out this year. One being a landscape analysis, which we hope to launch around New York Climate Week, which also is our Sustainable Development Impact meetings, which happen in New York. And then at our annual meeting at Davos in 2026, we really hope to launch our report on the business case for investing in wildfire resilience. I've been saying this, and I think someone like David, who I've seen at maybe 4 conferences over the last 2 months, has heard me say this many times. But you know, the forum, we really enter these types of partnerships and work with a tremendous amount of humility. When I look into the crowd, when I hear all of the work that you all have been doing over decades, you know, we really lean on you and look to you as the experts. We are here to help accelerate the work that you're already doing, and hopefully we can play that role to accelerate and catalyze. So without further ado, because I know everyone is ready to hear from some of our more, I'll say, esteemed guests and who've spoken before, but I'd like to bring up some of our panelists. So I think I'll just invite you all up now and then start introducing you. Again, trying to keep time here. So first, we have Dr. Peter Moore from the FAO Global Fire Hub, a global fire and land management expert. Peter brings over 40 years of experience advising governments, international institutions, including the FAO, World Bank, and Australian government on fire policy and climate resilient planning. We met Sean earlier, but again, we have Sean Triplett from the Earth Fire Alliance. Also David Saah, who we met earlier, I think just in the past session, from lots of places, but from the principal lead at Spatial and Informatics Group, also co-leading Google's AI Collaborative, and from University of San Francisco. Is that correct? Yes. And then finally, last but not least, we have Sunpil Jin from the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, where he serves as the Vice Executive Director, bringing more than 30 years of experience in the forest sector, leading regional forest cooperation, capacity building, and biodiversity initiatives across Asia. So maybe to begin, Peter, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. May I add my thanks and appreciation to OGM and to the World Bank. As Natalie mentioned, I'm here to tell you a little bit about the Global Fire Management Hub. And we mentioned that Mr. Ko is from AFRICO, the Asia Forestry Cooperation Organisation. There's a number of other organisations. Natalie's with the World Economic Forum, looking at their wildfire things. There's a number of places where people are seeking to come together. And this is another one. And I think one of the things we should think about over the yesterday and today is the fact that we need opportunities to come together, but we need opportunities to come together where we have a bit more time, where we see each other a bit more often. And so some of those complex solutions, insurance, for example, sorry, David, can be looked at and understood by all of us, or better incorporated into what we're doing. So the Global Fire Management Hub is a joint effort of the Food and Agricultural Organisation of the United Nations and the United Nations Environment Programme, and a series of partners that you'll see in a little while. It's underpinned by the idea of moving from that, what used to be called the fire management triangle, which is focused on basically the fire side of things, to the fire management, ecology, and particularly the fire culture. In other words, the people and the landscape. And so that's the thinking. And when we move to that space, it becomes more complex. There are more actors, there are more players, there are more people to talk about and work with. The hub has 5 pillars, so 5 areas of focus. They are knowledge and data sharing, capacity building, wildfire resilient communities, and that's part of the social side of things, fire risk reduction and early warning, and we've heard quite a bit about how to support that, what the logic and the rationale is in these past couple of days, and then integrated fire management, policy development and implementation. The aim of the hub is to strengthen countries' capacities to implement integrated fire management. This is under the UN umbrella and under FAO and UNEP's umbrella. So the focus on countries is on developing countries, the global south. So it's about bringing the expertise that many of you have in your countries into some sort of connection with the developing south, with those countries that perhaps don't yet have a big fire problem or have one but haven't started to deal with it. In developing the Global Fire Management Hub, the Fire Hub, we held a series of workshops, technical workshops. They were to look at the Global Fire Monitoring Centre, which Professor Johan Goldhammer, many of you will know of him, has been doing for many, many years, and that's being brought into the Global Fire Management Hub. The second workshop was about integrating the other networks, some other networks that were part of various organisations, the FAO, the European Union, and others. How would they come in to the Fire Hub? And then the third workshop was about Fire Hub operations and structure. How would this group organise itself, and what would it do? It's important to note that the Global Fire Management Hub was submitted to the Committee of Forestry 27th meeting in 2024 on the agenda, and it was endorsed. Now that means it is a formal thing. It's not a statutory body of the UN or of FAO, but it's formally accepted by the Committee of Forestry around the world. So there's now a requirement for FAO to report about what the Fire Hub has been doing in the previous 2 years at the next COFO in 2028 or 26 next year, and also for the regions of FAO and the country offices to think about it. So there's 130 odd offices, there's 6 regions, and all of those now have a requirement to think about the aspects of the Fire Management Hub, along with our partners in UNEP as well. That also is important because it speaks to the potential for the FAO to act in a convening way. You know, formal structure, invite people in, and I'll talk a bit about the first plenary session of the FAO that was held last week. Just quickly, the Fire Hub has a steering group, so a group of people from the donors and some of the key actors, UNEP obviously, and some others. It has a small secretariat, some working groups. There are 3 at the moment, but there'll be 5 or more. Working groups will be formulated to address a task, look at an issue, conduct a review, and then they will finish. So the working groups won't be permanent or long-term. We have the Fire Hub plenary, and then I mentioned the 5 strategic pillars before. The global activities, we're developing an integrated fire management assessment tool. There are many countries that are interested in fire management but are not sure where they sit on the spectrum. What progress do they have? What are they good at? What are they not as good at? What do they know about? What do they not know about? So it combines the Landscape Fire Governance Framework and the IFM voluntary guidelines that FAO updated and revised last year. We had a workshop on the IFM assessment tool in November last year, and the tool will be launched, the governance module of that tool will be launched later this year. Developing knowledge products, the sort of things you would expect from a UN institution, those normative products about standards, methods, guidance and so on, and we'll be doing those, including notably on community-based fire management. And then the capacity building, e-learning, opportunities for people to come together and learn about a range of topics, a couple of which I mentioned there. The implementing partners under the UN umbrella, the FAO of course, the World Meteorological Organisation, the International Liaison Committee of the International Wildland Fire Conference. The conference will be held in Australia in 2028. The UN Environment Programme, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, Global Fire Monitoring Centre, and the regional networks, and then some national agencies. The key funding partners you can see there, Germany, Korean Forest Service, supporting a project. Canada is a very major supporter, along with France and Portugal through OGIF, and the United States in the initial stages. I mentioned that last week we held the first of the Fire Hub plenaries. So the Fire Hub is formulated, has a steering group. The steering group had its second meeting last Friday, and now we had the first of the plenaries. There was a series of high-level speakers from FAO, from UNEP, the Global Fire Monitoring Centre, Canada, Brazil, Zimbabwe, Korea, Germany, ASEAN. So it's covering the planet, and that's part of that convening opportunity that a UN agency creates that I think collectively as a fire management community we should and can take advantage of. There was an Indigenous leader from Colombia who opened the plenary, and they, collectively, these people provided an overview of the perspectives. Really interestingly, the attendance was very broad. There were more than 190 people physically at the meeting. There were around 200 online. Those 190 people represented 160 organisations, and there were 52 countries represented by government officers of a ministry of some description. Now, I've been to a lot of meetings in my time and a lot of gatherings, and I don't think I've ever been to a fire management meeting that had 52 countries in the room. So that's an example of the sort of thing that we can build upon and work on. There were, very importantly, Indigenous groups. There was an entire panel in one session, an entire session for Indigenous people. Representatives from South America, from Mexico, and, Latin America, Africa, and then from Asia as well. I mentioned the Indigenous peoples. The sorts of communication they made was really moving. It was lovely to hear them talk about their relationship with fire, how they view fire, how they think of fire. They're not frightened of it. They're not scared of it. They use it. It's part of their life, part of their spiritual connection to land, and so on. And that's a direction that I think, as a fire management community, we should pay a lot of attention to and move towards. Obviously, following on from that is the local community-based fire management that many of you would be familiar with or heard of. That was also reinforced. We talked about the future of capacity building and development. Now, there was a key difference here because to most of us, most of the time, for most of the last decades, capacity building means training people in doing something. And we need to do more than that. We need to build capacity in institutions, build capacity in organisations, build capacity with technologies like the things we've seen here today. We talked about policy development, and those countries, Canada, Brazil, India and Portugal, all have a national strategy, and they talked about how they've developed it. Notably, in the case of Brazil, it's a 12-year process. So like a lot of fire management processes, it's not quick. And then there was a discussion on international interoperability. The FAO managed to organise and has adopted a mascot. This is Pyra, or Pira, depends on what your language is. She's a female tiger, and she's representing strength, courage, a protective instinct, and importantly, helping to address the fire management gender representation that we've all been living with for 3 or 4 decades. Thank you very much.
All right, good afternoon. Again, thank you for the invite. Sean Triplett with the Earth Fire Alliance. Good, okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about collaboration, not competition, as we look at integrated fire management and the integrated data sets that go along with that. This is a graph that, in my previous job, I was the tools and technology lead for the U.S. Forest Service Fire and Aviation position at the National Interagency Fire Center. And in that position, our Congress had a habit of passing a lot of bills without a lot of direction or overlapping or contradicting direction. And over the course of those bills, there was a massive piece of land legislation that was called the Dingle Act. Right in the middle of it, there was 10 directives given to the fire organization about modernizing technology. A second piece of legislation that was passed was aviation safety and modernization. So looking at how we can increase our use of technology, one, to reduce the use of aviation assets and the exposure that goes with that. And then the third was the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which had been mentioned earlier, which was a significant investment in the United States infrastructure, particularly in the area of risk reduction and fuels management. As that happened, we were invited to participate in what's called a PCAST, which is the Presidential Council Advisors of Science and Technology. So it's a group of individuals that report in a nonpartisan reports to the president and to others in the U.S. government. They focus on wildfire management and risk and also looking at remote sensing. And one of the things that I was really struggling with over time in dealing with not only the Forest Service and fire leadership was as I was struggling with trying to get the message across to our leadership in the US government that we were passing multiple pieces of legislation that were resulted in multiple programs. And what happens when you build programs, you start to build a large data set, and they were all disconnected. And so I worked with some folks, and we built this chart to show that fire is an integrated system. You have, in the middle there, you have your firefighters. And don't look at those firefighters as just being suppression assets. One of the beauties about the media is they really like to focus on suppression. That's a downside for all of us because we're trying to explain and tell our stories to the public about how important pre-assessments are, risk reduction, fuels treatment. But that's where all the money goes. And so we started this paradigm of, well, if we can build it for suppression, there's no reason that it can't work in the pre and post-fire stages. And that's really what we're trying to represent here in the middle. But if you look at all the different circles, those are all different parts of the puzzle that go into integrated fire management and suppression. And they're all producing different parts of data. This graph and the explanation in the PCAST report went to our previous administration, specifically President Biden at the time, and he got it and was able to put in some legislation to start building up the data interoperability and integration portions of the Forest Service and the United States Fire Program. And before I left, we were implementing those procedures and processes in place to not only bring more real-time data exchange and knowledge to our federal partners, but working closer with our state partners and then all the way down to our tribal partners and others. So I just wanted to say this is kind of the background on why, when I look at data and I look at integrated fire management and I look at interoperability, I use this as a foundation for moving forward. I'm going to skip a couple slides because I know we're trying to get through on time, and you saw some of the fire sat this morning. But really, Earth Fire Alliance, my position is the data integration and operations lead. I've been tasked with building the alliance piece of the Earth Fire Alliance. And so we really want to, as I mentioned earlier, FireSat, which is being funded through philanthropic and nonprofit routes, is working to transformative change the way we look at wildfire. Not just focusing on early detection and monitoring, but getting a better perspective of how fire is changing our landscape. And we're wanting to take that data and get it out to those end users, to countries around the world, to communities, indigenous populations, so they can then use that data to leverage their story as they go to decision makers and funders and others to say, I have a fire problem here, or fire is a part of our landscape. We need to work together on how we take advantage of that to improve our ecosystem. And so I mentioned earlier about the persistence gap, and I talked a little bit about how all those satellites that we mentioned, motospheres and the geostationary satellites, they weren't purpose-built satellites for fire. They had a bunch of different ecosystem monitoring channels to them. The other downfall to them is because they're in polar orbits, they only pass certain parts of the Earth at certain times. And I think our partners at Aurora Tech, we've talked about this, and we also partnered up with our partners at Canadian Forest Service. The other thing about those satellites is when they pass to fire-prone areas in the mid-latitudes, either in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, they're passing in what firefighters call like the witching hour. I mean, they're missing the witching hour. They're not passing at those times. And so that's, say, between 1400 and about 2000 in the afternoon when fires usually typically get up. They burn their hottest. That's when the atmosphere is its warmest and driest, and the fuel conditions are at their worst. So not only do we have a persistent gap in our observation, we also have a gap really focused when it's needed the most, which is in those afternoon time periods when we're experiencing our worst fire behavior. So as we look to build out the operational capacity, we want to close that gap down to within 20 minutes, and then we want to focus on what products that we're going to provide. So as I mentioned earlier, Earth Fire Alliance is not working to provide interfaces or dashboards or any of that. We're going to provide 4 standard products to the global community. The first one just being your burn area. So every 20 minutes, you'll get an updated area of burn. The FRP, the fire radiative power, so that'll come in your hotspot file. And the fire progression, which is basically every 20 minutes in a pattern. And then we may provide detection alerts, but what we'll do is work with the indigenous communities, the governments, and others to give them the data and set up a time series so they can then produce alerts off of that. So this is kind of the operational focus. And then the last piece is really getting into that that bottom part there, where we're going to also be providing the raw data. So individuals that want to get in and do the science and look at doing their own burn severity and burn analysis. And so we're accomplishing this by using several different methods of data dissemination. We're really going to focus on an open ICD API. We're going to take advantage of OGC, which is Open Geospatial Consortium standards. We're going to leverage 2 large cloud providers in Google and Google Earth Engine and Amazon. And then we also have partnered up with Esri to provide data through an ArcGIS online organization and the Living Atlas, which is a host of information. And our recent addition is the Amazon Open Data Initiative, and so where you can take our data and collaborate with other Amazon Open Data partners. The last thing is we have the Google AI. So I mentioned that we're not doing models and analysis. We've partnered up with and it's going to be a transition to you, for the Google AI initiative, Open Data, where we're going to be one of the key data providers to Google and allowing Google and all of its other partners, OpenAI and others, to pull our data in. And one of the things about fire detection is we're still using some pretty old, outdated detection algorithms that were built originally with Modus and Veers. I know NOAA and some other agencies have been working on updating those detection algorithms. One of the things that we'd like to do through the Google AI is do like a bake-off. Because one of the things that we expect to see is that all detection algorithms aren't the same. As we all know, the atmosphere has different characteristics. We have lots of water vapor in the tropical regions and then very dry areas. And all that type of atmospheric characteristics will play different onto how fire radiates the energy up to the satellites. So what we're hoping to do is develop detection algorithms that are specific to maybe your ecosystem, your atmospheric conditions, and your burning conditions, so it could be more sensitive to cooler fires or more robust in handling the hotter fires that you may experience in your areas. So that's all, and this is just one of my experiences out on the fire line. But if you have any other questions out there, just reach out to us, and then we'll be able to answer those for you. And again, I'll be outside at the booth until the end of the day. So thank you.
We're almost there, guys. Almost there, and I'm going to keep it to 10 minutes if I can get the slide deck up. I promise. Is it up yet? There we go. How many of you guys have heard of the term AI? 12,000 times. How many of you guys have heard of the phrase that AI can help you with wildfire? Yes. How many do you know how that actually works? Kinda. Right, so what I'm hoping is I could walk through what that process potentially could be and talk about this AI collaborative for wildfire. So when we think about the wildfire space in the simplest terms, in the pre-fire phase and the active fire phase, not in terms of suppression, but in terms of understanding what those behaviors actually are, we're thinking through some things. We're thinking about a whole bunch of Earth observations, the Aurora Tech data, the Earth Fire Alliance data, the FIRMs, the VEERS, all the stuff that you heard about. That information is brought down along with Landsat and weather data to produce a bunch of different outputs. Fuels information, right? What are the fuels? What are the fuel loadings? Fire weather. What is the weather now? What is the weather potentially in the future? Where are the active fires? What are their current perimeters? And then how do I manipulate those fuels over time? Treatments. Once you have that, you could nail down and run them through fire behavior models themselves to get things like rate of spread, flame length, intensity. And then that gives you a bucket of hazards. Then you can combine that with a bunch of vulnerability and exposure information to think through things like environmental vulnerability, public health vulnerability, infrastructure, loss of public property and life, to see what your overall risk is. And then there's a variety of different reporting mechanisms. How many of you guys have a mental model of something like this in your brain? Everybody should be raising their hands. You guys have all done stuff like this before. Now, when we think about AI, what are we talking about? There's a whole bunch of different widgets here as well. There's the machine learning, deep learning models. This is what traditionally people do and know. This is what I'll spend a lot of time on. The hard part with it is that you need volumes and volumes and volumes of data to build these models. You need volumes and volumes and volumes of observations to build the models on top of. Incredibly accurate, cutting edge, but expensive. There's a new generation of models coming out called these Earth Observable Foundation models. Some people call these Geo Foundation models. Think about ChatGPT but for satellite data, where you have low shot, no shot return, where you only need a few samples to run inference. I only need a few samples to see where my fuels are. I only need a few observations to identify where a treatment actually occurs. They're being built, and they're being built fast right now. Connected to that, you have large language models. How many of you have ever used ChatGPT for report writing? Come on, get your hands up there. We all have, right? They're amazing. They're paradigm shifters, right? The challenge with those is capturing knowledge, the knowledge management graphs that you build behind the scenes. Do you have the right PDFs? Do you have the right reports? Are you tuning your LLM in a way that makes sense, where you don't hallucinate, where the thing doesn't lie, right? You don't want it to lie. And then once you get to that phase and you understand how the LLMs work, you can connect them to these things called orchestrators, workflow managers, where you can start combining the data sets that come in with the workflows that you have defined with a variety of microservices. Think of a microservice as a fire behavior model. Think of a microservice as a treatment management plan, where you're hitting an API that actually kicks out a product for you. Once you have those parts configured and interconnected, then all of a sudden you can start doing things like prompt engineering on top of it, where you can start engaging in a conversation with these sorts of systems. And when you start getting a little bit futuristic, and this is where Ilke spent a lot of her time, University of San Diego's supercomputer lab, where you're building these user-inspired platforms, where you describe to the system the applications you want sitting on the data sets and the models and the operations as you currently use them. Sounds really futuristic. Now, if you took the first graph and the second graph and you merge them together, there's a whole bunch of different interlockers. There's LLMs that could help you design and build treatments. There's the GeoFMs, the Earth Observable Foundation models, the deep learning models that could build all the input data sets that you actually need for your fire behavior models. There's a whole bunch of orchestrators that can interconnect these different elements. If you wanted to get fancy, you could use a word called agentic AI. All that means is that the LLM is building a workflow for you, and then you can start locking the things together. So when people talk about AI, and they talk about AI and wildfire, it's not one thing. It's a series of things that are customized and specifically built with a specific output that has a group, a community of practice that has that expertise that feeds that knowledge into the system. People are a critical part of the knowledge capture and gathering for these systems to actually work. That make sense? Yeah. I'm going to give you some examples. So this is an example that we did with the World Bank. In this example, what the use case was is that we were working with local organizations, and they wanted to get a better understanding of treatment management practices in their local community. This was specifically in Thailand. So what we ended up doing is we ended up collecting all the different data sets that they were interested in terms of identifying where fire presence actually occurs, what were land use, what are vegetation characterizations, what are different climatological variability, and we did that over time. We used a decision support tree, a random forest machine learning algorithm, to identify patterns, and then from that, the users are able to basically gameplay or scenario play different sorts of analytics based off of their local historic trend. What was nice about this approach is it was this machine learning algorithm was co-designed, co-developed with the folks that actually use it. What does that do? That builds trust with the end user. Second example, how many of you guys ever played with fire behavior models, right? One of the things that really pushes those models forward is wind speed, and wind direction. And that's one of the coarsest variables that come in. It's also one of the hardest variables to actually model. Using these foundation models, you're able to take low-resolution data, use an AI model, benchmark it against crown truth data, and get high-resolution information at a breakneck speed. There's a whole wide variety of these that are coming out right now. And the nice thing about it is that this sort of input all of a sudden gives you better fidelity to the behavior modeling that you're actually doing. And as the foundation model continues to improve, your outputs continue to improve over time. A lot of effort being spent on this sort of thing. This next example is kind of fun. So in this example, what LA County did is that they made 3 bots, 3 experts. One expert that was really focused as being a wildfire specialist. So imagine getting all the knowledge, all the PDFs, all the reports that you have for folks like Sean and the firefighters out there, and you ram it into one space. This is the knowledge graph. This is the knowledge base of what wildfire specialists know. So everything that chatbot's going to kick out is what a firefighter would say. You do the same thing for a public health expert, and then what was the first one? I think it's an insurance thing or something or another. There's 3 different experts. And then what you do is you compete them against each other. What does this chatbot say against that chatbot? What does this volume of knowledge say about that volume of knowledge? And what that quickly does is it helps you identify where there's convergence of information. It also identifies where there's disagreement based off of a different decision-making context that you could track based off of the reporting that's associated in the underlying data sets. Interesting. There's a lot more of this stuff coming down the pipe. How do you actually do this? And so this is where the AI Collaborative for Wildfire really takes place. The interesting thing about it's a collaborative that was brought together by Google.org. Yes, I got it, 2 minutes. And it's bringing together a whole bunch of collectives to actually deal with a wide variety of wildfire components. The collective itself, it's really trying to figure out how to advance AI wildfire-powered solutions. It's really emphasizing collaboration, not competition. It's trying to catalyze adoption. How do you get people to absorb this as fast as you can? How do you expand the wildfire ecosystem? How do you get more people engaged and involved in this conversation? And then how do you ensure interoperability and transparency in the system? So if you listen to a lot of the talks that have been occurring over the past few days, it's all the same principles and theories that occur. And then how do you sustain this over time? There's 4 basic working groups. Working group 1 is really focused on Earth observations. How do you get the Aurora Tech information, the Earth Fire information, the firm's data sets, the Canadian Fire data sets, all to work together in an ecosystem that creates a public good. Second work stream is really focused on improving the fire behavior models themselves and making them openly accessible and available. The third one is how do you get this put down into tools? Not necessarily the tools that the AI Collaborative is building, but the tools that we saw that were built like in Turkey. There's a wide variety of amazing tools here. How do you get these tools put into your hands? And then the last one is the mapping the wildfire ecosystem. This is stuff that Natalie and Peter were talking about. How do you get more people involved or engaged in this conversation in a way that's meaningful and transparent? Now, if you go back to the 5 R's of wildfire management, there's a whole wide variety of ways how this AI technology can make things faster, better, cheaper, smarter, more efficient, more inclusive. And there's some examples up here, but you could run wild with the types of engagements based off of some of the structures that we saw beforehand. And the last thing I wanted to say is please get involved, please get engaged. My UR code, or the code is up there. Feel free to tag us, feel free to engage in the conversation. Everything that we're building within the collaborative, we're hoping to make available to folks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today to share some insight into forest fire management. My name is Sunpil Jin, Vice Executive Director of Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, AFCO. Today, I will be introducing AFCO's approach to forest fire management and how we are working with our member countries. Let me briefly introduce AFCO. AFCO is a treaty-based intergovernmental organization established in 2018, committed to strengthening forest cooperation in Asia and implementing concrete action to promote sustainable forest management and climate change mitigation. AFCO has implemented over 60 projects with 70 member countries, with 15 parties and 2 observers across Asia. I will focus on climate forest disaster risk management today. Every year, approximately 340 million to 370 million hectares of land worldwide are affected by wildfires. In Asia, large-scale forest fires has become a recurring challenge. For example, in Indonesia, nearly 1 million hectares of forest were lost to wildfire between January and October 2023. In Kazakhstan, Abay region, fire destroyed around 60,000 hectares. In Mongolia, Salange province, as of May 2025, wildfires has affected about 1,900 hectares of forest and grassland. So, why do forest fire matter? First, greenhouse gas emission. When forests burn, they release large amounts of carbon dioxide. Accelerating climate change and destroying vital carbon sinks. Second, economic loss. Wildfire damage timber resources, farmland, and infrastructure. Firefighting and recovery efforts place a heavy burden on public finances. Third, biodiversity loss. Fire kills countless plant and animal species, including endangered ones. Repeated fires can cause irreversible ecosystem damage and long-term land degradation. It is crucial to prevent wildfires and minimize their impact. So, what is APOCO doing to address these issues? Let's briefly look at 4 projects that APOCO is implementing to reduce the risk and damage caused by forest fire. The first project is funded by the Asian-Korea Cooperation Fund. It's being implemented in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. The project has 3 main objectives. The first objective is to develop an integrated forest fire management system through early detection and monitoring of wildfire, enabling prompt suppression with the involvement of local communities. To achieve this, the project will provide essential infrastructure and equipment, including lookout tower equipped with CCD cameras and monitoring system, as well as forest fire vehicles and suppression tools. Second objective focused on strengthening the capacity market linkage of community forest enterprises. Many local communities rely on forest clearing for subsistence farming, which increases the risk of fires. By providing alternative income sources and improving enterprise viability, the project helps reduce such forest dependency, thereby decreasing the likelihood of forest fires. The third objective is to provide training that enhances both institutional and technical capacities for integrated forest fire management. Let's see how early detection and suppression activities are carried out as part of the integrated forest fire management system mentioned in the first objectives. When a forest fire occurs, it is fire detected by lookout tower. Reports can also be easily submitted through mobile devices, allowing for early detection. Next, the control center takes over. It receives the initial report and requests verification from the lookout tower. Once the fire is confirmed, the control tower issues real-time instruction to local organization. Local organization then share on-site information and respond according to the central government instructions to manage the fire effectively. Following this, firefighters and fire engine are dispatched to the scene. They continuously report the situation in real time. This cycle of sharing updates, receiving instruction, and taking immediate action continue until the fire is fully contained. Through development of this coordinated system, APOCO can help governments combine early detection, centralized command, and rapid local response. The second project I would like to introduce the title, Information and Communication Technology for Adaptation to Climate Change and Forest Fire Management in the Mekong region. It has been being implemented in Cambodia and Vietnam with funding from the Mekong Korea Corporation Fund. The project aimed to establish ICT-based forest fire management system in both countries as demonstration cases. To achieve this, the project activities are divided into three main components. First, vulnerability assessment using GIS-based terrain mapping, forest inventory survey, and real-time meteorological data collected from on-site weather station. The system assesses forest fire vulnerability and generates real-time forest fire danger index map. Second, forest fire management system. These maps are disseminated to fire management authorities and local communities to raise awareness and support prevent measures. In the event of a fire, the system also predict the direction and intensity of the spread, providing strategic information to guide firefighting, response, and suppression. Third, policy support and sharing. The information obtained from the system support, policy formulation, fire prevention campaigns, and forest protection strategy, which are shared with other Mekong countries. Based on this, relevant organization can establish and implement effective fire prevention policies. The project also seeks to facilitate learning visit to promote regional knowledge exchange. Oh, sorry. The third project is assuring the future of forest with integrated risk management, also known as Oturum, funded by the Republic of Korea and led by FAO in collaboration with APOCO. The project addresses existing gaps in forest-related data, risk understanding, and integrated risk management strategy. It also seeks to overcome the lack of an integrated approach to risk management for sustainable forest development. In 2024, APOCO contributed to the development of a review and analysis report, which serve as a foundation knowledge base for integrated fire management. APOCO also facilitated a workshop to gather high-level insight into the key challenges faced by the participating countries. Participants engaged in presentation and discussion on various topics, including the Global Forest Management Hub, National Forest Fire Management Policy, and community-based fire management practices in participating countries. This was followed by in-depth discussion and a field visit to the Forest Aviation Headquarters. The final one is Forest Fire Management in Asia, FFMA, a new initiative developed by APOCO. This is a cooperative project aimed at protecting Asian forests from wildfire, jointly funded by French Ministry and Europe and Foreign Affairs and the Korea Press Service. The FFMA initiative consists of 3 components. Let's take a close look at each of these components. Component 1, operating training, consists of 2 weeks field training designed to enhance understanding of the behavior and suppression techniques, each for Module 1 and Module 2. This training has been implemented as a pilot case since 2023, and full-scale operations are planned for the period 2026 to 2030. As part of this component, 2 workshops has already been organized this year. The first was a training of trainer on forest fire suppression, corresponding to Module 1, which focused on the behavior. The photo on the left shows a cross of burning exercise conducted in Thailand as part of Module 1. The training combined classroom lecture with field exercises. Participants explore how fuel, weather, and topography affect fire behavior using tools like the forest behavior training and the Campbell prediction system. They also engaged in sand table simulation, controlled burn, and forest line construction in mountainous terrain. Rappelling and compass navigation drills enhanced their field skill. The key highlight was prescribed burn using drone with thermal camera to monitor fire intensity and evaluate suppression strategy. The training brought together practitioners from APOCO member countries to strengthen region response capacity. The second training focused on fire behavior analysis and simulate component to Module 2. The photo on the right shows participants using a computer-based simulator in Indonesia during Module 2 training. compared to of the FFMA initiative is a higher education program. It includes 6-week short-term education program in France for 70 participants and a co-degree graduate scholarship program in forest fire management offered over 2 years by university in Korea and France for 20 students. So far, we have explored how APOCO is addressing the challenge of forest fire. Now it is time to turn our world into action and take the first step together in reducing forest fire risk and building resilient landscape. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think we have time for one question, if anybody in the audience has a question before we go to our next group of speakers. Any questions? None? Yeah. Okay, if there's no questions, do you guys have anything else? One last thing? Good. Okay. Then I think we'll move to our next panel. Yeah, so thank you all for joining, and yeah, we appreciate. Oh, we have one. One question. Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed it. Oh, we're getting a mic.
Thank you, everyone. I think really great to see so many networks coming along on this very important topic. My question really for you, Peter, and my apologies, I missed a little bit of your presentation. I was working on the side. In terms of the Global Fire Hub of the FAO, one, how are you also coordinating with, for example, AFOCU? I know you mentioned a number of other international organizations, but specifically with AFOCU or any other Asian networks. And second, in terms of the resources, you mentioned a few partners, if I recall. I think you said Germany and Canada, amongst others. What is sort of the vision? Because the resources that are needed, I think what we are hearing in this gathering here as well, is a lot of support, whether it is on technology or whether it's on the software side or the predictability, right? Can there be a possibility to be leveraging resources which are enough to get something going sub-regionally? So that's my question to you. Thanks.
Anita, in terms of the linkages, the point of the hub is connectivity and collaboration. So the hub may not do much in the way of lifting or anything, but bringing people together to then spin up what needs to happen. So the working groups under the pillars will bring together the appropriate people. So there was a panel session last week on data and coherence, data and harmonisation. So bringing the JRC and others together, and some of the people that are sitting up here, but also down in the audience. Using that to then leverage the sort of resources that are required. I don't think there's a vision that the hub will have lots of money to disperse to other people, but the idea would be to bring people together around a task, an issue or a problem, and convene them to then spin up an idea and approach the appropriate people and bring them together to do that. So it's that blending and connectivity that we're focusing on.
Great. Any other questions before our esteemed colleagues leave the stage? Okay. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And really appreciate you guys being fast. So thanks. So Now it is my honor to welcome up another set of very esteemed speakers. First, Dr. Ercan Oktan, a professor of forest engineering at Karadeniz Technical University. Dr. Oktan specializes in silviculture and forest rehabilitation with over 50 scientific publications. Next, we have Natia, and bear with me as I say your last name, Yönetiminde from Georgia, the deputy head of Georgia's National Forestry Agency and a seasoned policy expert. Natia has led major national forestry reforms and teaches at the Georgian Institute of Public Affairs. And finally, and I think he's here, and again, please bear with me, Dr. Bayrammurat Durdyev, from Turkmenistan, the head of the Biodiversity Laboratory at Turkmenistan's National Institute of Deserts. Dr. Durdyev brings 35 plus years in agroecology and sustainable land management and supports FAO GEF projects across the region. Thank you all. Dr. Ercan Oktan, I think we'll welcome you to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Good afternoon, everybody. Sunumumu Türkçe olarak yapacağım. Tabii sunum süremizin çok kısıtlı olduğu bilgisini aldım ama şöyle her ne kadar çok büyük bir data olmasa da şu ana kadar yaklaşık 16,5 dakika konuştu. Konuşmacıların ortalaması böyle. Tabii bunun içinde 2 kez konuşan David'i saymıyorum. O işin dışında tutuyorum onu. Dolayısıyla sizi akşam yemeğine yetiştireceğim. O kadar bir sürede anlatacağımı umut ediyorum. Evet, teşekkür ediyorum. Şimdi tabii bu işin esprisi sizi çok kısa bir sürede toparlamayı hedefliyorum sunuyu. Öncelikle Orman Genel Müdürlüğü'nün nasıl bir yapıda olduğunu az çok birçok sunuda gördük ama bir genel toparlamak gerekirse eğer, ülkenin 78 milyon hektarlık bir alanı olduğunu düşündüğümüzde bunun 23,4 milyon hektarlık alanı orman alanlarıyla kaplı durumda. Böyle baktığımızda tabii ülkenin yaklaşık %30'unu Orman Genel Müdürlüğü'nün yönettiğini söyleyebiliriz. Tabii bu dağılıma baktığımızda sadece ülkenin %30'unu yönetiyormuş gibi bir algı oluşmaması gerekiyor. Bunun gerekçesini belki bir sonraki slaytta da söyleyeceğim. Diğer açıdan baktığımızda bizim ülkemizin ormanlık alanlarını arttırma düzeyine baktığımızda Avrupa'da 1. sırada gözüküyor. Hep yangınlardan konuştuk, sanki orman alanlarını kaybediyormuşuz gibi bir algı var belki ama sonuç itibariyle orman alanlarının artması mevcut alanların da çoğalmasıyla ilgili, yeni orman alanlarının oluşmasıyla da ilgili. Bunu da göz ardı etmememiz gerektiğini düşünüyorum. Şimdi az önce söyledim, %30'unu yönetiyormuş gibi gözükse de nihayetinde Orman Genel Müdürlüğü ülkemizdeki 81 ilin, 922 ilçenin ve 18.240 köyün hepsinde faaliyet göstermektedir. Dolayısıyla ülkenin her noktasına dokunan bir teşkilattan bahsediyorum ve 180 yıldan fazla bu işi yapan bir teşkilattan bahsediyorum. Dolayısıyla şimdi burada biz aslında işbirliklerini konuşacağız ama işbirliğini konuşurken bu background'u da bir görmemizde fayda var diye böyle kısacık sunumlarla bunları size anlatmaya çalışıyorum. Tabii bu yönetimi nasıl yapıyor? Bu yönetimi de ülke genelinde 30 tane Orman Bölge Müdürlüğü, 283 tane Orman İşletme Müdürlüğü ve 2157 tane de orman işletme şefliğiyle bu işlemi yapıyor. Böyle baktığınızda çok büyük bir yapıya sahip olduğunda belki birazcık daha kolay algılayabiliriz diye düşünüyorum. Tabii işbirliklerini yaparken Orman Genel Müdürlüğü sadece uluslararası işbirlikleri değil, ülkenin içindeki işbirliklerini de göz ardı etmemek lazım. Örneğin yansıda görüyorsunuz, evet biz hep yangınlardan bahsettik, yangının yönetiminden bahsettik. Yangın yönetimi esnasında önleme faaliyetleri, yangının erken durdurulması ya da Orman Genel Müdürlüğü'nün hedefleri içerisinde olan o 10 dakika içinde alana ulaşma hedeflerinde düşündüğümüzde evet çok büyük bir çaba var ama bundan sonrası için de bir çabanın olduğunu göstermek için bu şu an gördüğünüz küçük video oynuyor. Bu da şu, orman yangınlarından sonra yangın gören sahaların yeniden ormanlaştırılması çabaları var ve bu çabalar içerisinde de yine teknolojinin kullanımını ifade etmeye çalışıyorum. Şu anda ekranda gördüğünüz sunu özellikle ormanların ulaşılması güç alanlarına tohum ekiminin nasıl yapıldığı ve bu ekim sonrasında alana gelen gençliklerin ya da fidanların nasıl tanımlandığını, machine learning kullanılarak bu işlemlerin nasıl yapıldığıyla ilgili küçük bir tanıtımdı diyelim. Bunun devamında baktığımızda tabii biz Orman Genel Müdürlüğü kendi bünyesinde bulunan 12 tane araştırma enstitüsü var ve bu araştırma enstitülerinde çeşitli konularda çalışmalar yapılıyor ve sonuçları elde ediliyor. Bunun dışında yine ülkemizde bulunan 12 tane orman fakültesi ki bir tanesi benim mensup olduğum orman fakültesi, 12 tane orman fakültesiyle direkt işbirlikleri var. Bunun haricinde de sadece orman fakülteleriyle değil birçok bilim dalını içeren üniversiteyle de işbirliği kurmuş durumda. Tabii burada bir önermeye de dikkatinizi çekmek isterim. Bu işbirlikleri sadece üniversitelerle kurulmuyor. Üniversitelerin işbirlikleriyle de otomatikmen işbirliği yapmış oluyor. Yani şöyle özetlemek gerekirse bizim üniversitemizin yaptığı bir işbirliğini Orman Genel Müdürlüğü de aynı kapsamda kullanarak bilgi alışverişi ya da teknoloji alışverişi kısmında bir yaklaşımı olduğunu söylemekte fayda var. Genel olarak değerlendirdiğimizde 55 ülkeyle işbirliğinin olduğu ya da iş geliştirme anlaşmalarının olduğu, prensip anlaşmalarının olduğunu söylemek lazım. Tabii bu işbirliklerini yaparken nelere dikkat etti? Bu iş sadece yangın yönetimiyle ilgili işbirlikleri değil, küresel iklim değişikliğinin en büyük sorunlarından biri olan işte emisyonların azaltılması da bu işbirliklerinin içerisinde. Emisyonların azaltılmasının ötesinde bir de bu işin denkleştirme kısmı var. Yani karbon yutaklarının nasıl koordine edileceği ya da mevcut alanlarını karbon depolamayı nasıl biraz daha fazla depolama imkanı sağlar. Bunu işte sivkütürel önlemlerle ya da amenajman planlarıyla bunu nasıl yapabiliriz'i ortaya koymaya çalışıyor. David kısmen değindi karbon yutaklarına ya da karbon emisyonlarının nasıl geliştiğine ve ufak değinmeler yaptı. Tabii bu anlamda baktığınızda orman yangınlarındaki karbon kayıplarını aslında ortaya koydu. Bunun sonucunda bu alanların yeniden ormanlaştırılmasının ne kadar önemli olduğu, en azından tüm dünya için bunun önemi birazcık daha ortaya çıkıyor diye düşünüyorum. Böyle hızlı hızlı konuşuyorum, lütfen kusuruma bakmayın. Çevirmen arkadaşlar da zor durumda belki kalabiliyorlardı burada ama zamanı iyi kullanmak istiyorum Natalie'ye söz verdiğim için. Ve şöyle baktığımızda dünyanın nerelerinde işbirlikleri olduğunu şöyle kabaca görebilirsiniz. Bunlar direkt işbirliklerini gösteriyor ancak bu işbirlikleri sadece Orman Genel Müdürlüğü'nün direkt işbirlikleri, az önce söylediğim örnekte olduğu gibi üniversitelerin ortak işbirliklerinden de faydalandığını düşündüğünde aslında dünyanın neredeyse tamamıyla bir işbirliği içerisinde olduğunu söyleyebiliriz Orman Genel Müdürlüğü için. Ve toparlamak gerekirse, belki herhalde bu kadar hızlı kullanan olmadı diye düşünüyorum. Orman Genel Müdürlüğü'nün çalışma alanlarını söyledim. Ülkemizdeki tüm köylere kadar ulaştığını söylemiştim. Bizim ülkemizde bir tabir vardır. İşte vali olacağınıza, aramızda vali yok değil mi? Umarım yoktur. Vali olacağınıza ormancı olun derler. Neden? Çünkü ormancı en ücra köşede vardır. Bu işi de en iyi başaranlardan biri Orman Genel Müdürlüğü. Şimdi slaytta da görüyorsunuz işte Orman Genel Müdürlüğü dağdaki çobandan NASA'nın derdine kadar tüm çözümlere yardımcı olmak için hazır durumdadır. Bunu niye söylüyorum? Şimdi orman yangınlarıyla ilgili konuştuk işte alanların kazanılması, yangınların şiddeti ama bununla birlikte yangın olmasa da dünyamız ısınıyor. bu ısıya adaptasyonla ilgili çalışmalara ihtiyaç var. Bu çalışmalardan biri ve birçoğunuz biliyorsunuzdur, Hashimoto DNA'sı dediğimiz bir sistem çalışıyor. NASA'nın çalıştığı bir sistem. En son ürettikleri işte 102 santigrat derecede yaşayabilen bir canlı ürettiler. Yeni DNA'ya yeni 4 tane sentetik marker ekleyerek bu işi çözdüler ve bu anlamda baktığımızda belki biz yüksek ısılarda yaşayabilecek ağaçları nasıl üreteceğimiz konusunda da altyapılarımıza hızlı verdiğimizi söylemekte fayda var diyebilirim. Sabırla dinlediğiniz için teşekkür ederim.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oktan. Just to say, I lived in Switzerland for a long time and learned to keep time there, and I think you would be very welcome in Switzerland. So thank you. Next up, we'll have Natia.
Okay, now I have to. So I'm not so fast, but I promise be brief. Well, from my point of view, and I'm quite sure that it's not my observation, beyond strategic documents, modern technologies, techniques, methodologies, which is different, take into consideration countries' policies and contexts. Very important part is partnership for have success in all phases and not only when we are talking about forest fire management. So in the past, in Georgia's case, we had a very successful cooperation with U.S. Forest Service, for instance, with Global Fire Monitoring Center based on the Freiburg and many, many other countries. But especially transboundary cooperation is crucial to our neighbors, Turkey and Azerbaijan. And we're proud that we have strong partnership and collaboration. And we do hope that we can continue identification of the common interesting topics for further cooperation. But not only this one, I think that it's also essential to share experience from the countries that have well-established systems and extensive knowledge on the fire management, because so we'll try to learn from our own mistakes, but it's always better to have experienced friends on your side and helping to avoid those mistakes altogether. So we committed to joint initiatives, joint projects, knowledge transfer, education, methodology for risk assessment would be the key point for further discussion and some initiatives for the further projects. So we are very much looking forward and for the future. Even these 2 days already had a significant contribution to have contacts, to have some additional ideas. I'm pretty sure that we will back to our country. Some other ideas will come because we need time to think about all huge and excellent information what was provided by our brilliant presenters during these 2 days. So I do hope that I will see lots of projects with the participation of these countries and especially with our neighbors, I would say. Thank you. Once again, thank you, organizers of this meeting, to all presenters and participants, of course. Thanks.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, уважаемые участники семинара, от имени делегации Туркменистана позвольте мне выразить благодарность правительству Турецкой Республики, а также Всемирному банку за высокую организацию и теплый прием. Я постараюсь изложить кратко, 5 минут ваше терпение. Уважаемые коллеги, резко континентальный, исключительно сухой климат с высоким дефицитом влаги и интенсивным испарением, сопровождающимся периодическими пыльными ветрами, это наиболее характерные черты климатических условий Туркменистана. Испаряемость превышает осадки более чем 20 раз. Из-за засухи и высоких температур сельскохозяйственная работа, а также посадка и выращивание деревьев для получения ожидаемой проживаемости первые годы необходимо поддерживать путем искусственного орошения. Уважаемые коллеги, несмотря на сухой и жаркий климат, до сегодняшнего дня соответствующие государственные учреждения Туркменистана успешно препятствуют возникновению лесных пожаров. Одним из основных факторов возникновения лесных пожаров в климатических условиях Туркменистана является резкое повышение воздуха в весенних периодах. Например, в мае текущего года температура воздуха превысила 40 градусов. Такие климатические условия Туркменистана отрицательно влияют на рост развития эфемерных растений, которые высыхают за короткий период, что создает условия для возникновения очагов возгорания. Учитывая это, климатические и природные особенности, разработанные широко применяются агротехнические методы борьбы. Для выполнения вышеуказанных задач только в текущем году из государственного бюджета Туркменистана выделено 5 миллионов 600 тысяч манат. Я представляю карту, где указаны основные площади лесов Туркменистана. Я их перечислять не буду, все они известно указаны в карте. Уважаемые коллеги, все леса, согласно лесному кодексу Туркменистана, от 2011 года относятся к первой категории. Леса под категорией первой используются исключительно для выполнения защитных функций. В почвенных климатических условиях Туркменистана роль лесов велика, они выполняют защитные функции, играют важную роль в обеспечении устойчивого развития экономики страны. В Туркменистане покрытый лесом площадь составляет более 4,3 миллиона гектаров, а лесистость составляет 8,8%. И здесь представлены 3 типа лесов. Я представляю отдельные показатели изменения климата. Недавно совместно Национальный институт пустынь и специалисты Всемирного банка выполнили в рамках программы Всемирного банка устойчивые ландшафты Центральной Азии, выполнен проект РОАМ Туркменистан. И установлены изменения климата. Последние десятилетия изменения климата повышается среднегодовая температура почвы на 1 градус. Эти условия тоже влияют на возникновение очагов возгорания. Уважаемые коллеги, я сокращаю свой доклад. Основные проблемы изменения климата в Туркменистане – это повышение, я уже повторяю, уменьшение осадков, продление летнего сезона на 15 дней, деградация пастбищ, неудовлетворительное естественное возобновление. Я перечисляю, уважаемые коллеги, основные стратегические документы. Это национальная лесная программа Туркменистана. Учитывая особенности почвенных климатических условий Туркменистана, охрана лесного фонда от пожаров осуществляется в соответствии с лесного кодекса Туркменистана. В целях обеспечения пожарной безопасности лесного фонда осуществляется первое противопожарное обустройство лесов, в том числе строительство, реконструкция и содержание дорог противопожарного назначения. Второе — создание систем средств предупреждения и тушения лесных пожаров, а также формирование запасов горючих смазочных материалов на период высоких пожарных опасностей. Мониторинг пожарной опасности в лесах, разработка планов тушения лесных пожаров и, конечно же, тушение лесных пожаров. В заключение, позвольте мне еще раз выразить благодарность организаторам данного семинара за высокую организацию и желаю вам всем крепкого здоровья и успехов в работе. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you so much, and I'll say a special thanks to this panel for really speeding through. Because of that, I think we have time for questions. If anybody in the audience has questions. Am I missing? Yes, please. Do we have a mic? Yeah, we're waiting for a mic.
Can you hear me? Thank you, in particular Professor Oktan, for sharing your country's situation regarding the forest area and the fire management. Interestingly, while Korea and Turkey have different forest area, in fact, the Korea's forest area is decreasing or stabilized. But surprisingly, in Turkey, the forest area expanded, alarming pace, like the 3 billion hectares in 20 years. That is very big number. And I just wondered, as the forest area increase with the big numbers, the investment in protection, like the fire prevention, in terms of the budget investment, also increased in Turkey? That is my question. Yeah. If you know, let me know that it's fact.
Okay. Evet, doğrudur. Tabii bu yatırımlar artarken aynı zamanda tekrar edeyim, doğrudur. Bu yatırımlar artarken Orman Genel Müdürlüğü kendi bütçesiyle bunları bu artışları kendi bütçesi içerisinden yapmakta. Yani bu anlamda kendi üretimiyle kendi bütçesini büyüterek bu noktaya gelmektedir. Yani hem koruma hem işletme bütçeleri birbirini dengeleyerek gitmektedir. Umarım cevap olabilmiştir.
Hey, any other questions? No, I might, excuse me, because our panelists are so excellent, I think I'm going to ask each of them to slow down and take 1 minute each to answer. When thinking about collaboration and countries with diverse ecosystems and forests and different issues, what is the best way you feel you can collaborate moving forward? Are there things maybe you heard this week or the last 2 days, or are there things that are aspirational that you would really like to move forward on as you think for the next year or 2 years as far as collaboration and cross-border, perhaps cross-sector? So Dr. Ochan, maybe we'll start with you. And again, take your time. Thanks for being so quick earlier.
Şimdi şunu belirtmekte fayda var. İşbirliği ormancılık sektörü için belirli bir sınırlılığı olmayan bir işbirliğidir. Çünkü ormancılığın içerisinde o kadar çok disiplin var ki işbirliğinin de bir sınırı yok. Dolayısıyla gelecekte işbirliği yapılmasının belki öngörü olarak Şu tanımı kullandıktan sonra söylemek daha doğru. Ben ormancılığı bir meslek olarak tanımlamam. Ormancılığı bir aile olarak tanımlarım. Dolayısıyla da bu aile içerisinde biz her türlü işbirliğini yapmak durumundayız. Örneğin kendi adıma söylemem gerekirse, evet biz ormanlarımızı her ne kadar artırıyor olsak da günümüzdeki iklim değişiminin etkilerine baktığımızda daha önceki sunularda söylendi. İşte hedef 1,5 santigrat dereceydi ama şu anda acaba 2,5 santigrat derecelerde tutabilir miyizin derdindeyiz. Bunu tutabilecek olan, yani dünyanın bu anlamda dengesini oluşturabilecek olan şey yine ormanlar olduğu için belki işbirliğini bu satı üzerinde yapmamız daha doğru olur diye düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Teşekkürler. Natia.
Well, when we are talking about, so I'm not so strong on technologies. It's okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Finally. Well, when we are talking about cooperation and collaboration, it can be in the different forms, especially in transborder cooperation, starting from the, because advanced wildfire management requires active data sharing and a fast knowledge transfer. So we had experience, for instance, with our neighbor countries, with Turkey and Azerbaijan namely, to have common trainings for our rescue teams and foresters. Such a partnership, and we started for this time working on the elaboration of the fast data changing systems. And as far as I'm informed from our emergency management agency, they have this some very close cooperation and data exchange system among these neighbor countries. So I just imagine that for future, this transborder cooperation can be based on the such activities because for the sustainability as well, what we have to do, we have to keep what we have now and trying to strengthen this based on the challenges and problems that we have in our countries. And as I mentioned yesterday, I assume that these challenges is more or less same, I would say, in the regional level in Black Sea region. So I'm looking forward for such a future cooperation with our neighbors, and not only, as I mentioned before, all experience, all knowledge which can be transferred with, for instance, our colleague from Korea, he talked about the educational systems, high-level education, PhDs, and so on. Some connections between universities also would be very useful to have qualified staff, because one of the main challenges, I think, it's a qualified staff beyond the technologies and resources and money and techniques. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Dr. Durdyev.
Уважаемые коллеги, как вам известно, 80% территории нашей страны занимают пустынные и полупустынные ландшафты. Ну, особенности есть вот пожарные. В последнее время вы, наверное, не слышали, что в Туркменистане был пожар. Но, тем не менее, нам нужны эти инновационные технологии, которые докладчики сегодня прекрасно выступали. Я считаю, что обмен мнений, значит, такого рода семинары обязательно нужно у нас в Туркменистане. Я благодарен всем участникам конференции, дальнейших ваших успехов и совместное сотрудничество у нас в Туркменистане и в других странах. Спасибо.
Thank you so much, and thank you again to all of our panelists from earlier and now. You know, I think I was at the FAO Fire Hub last week, and one of the kind of closing speakers was from Brazil and talking about COP and how important and critical it is to bring the discussion of wildfires to COP this year, and it's really a priority for Brazil. Some of you may have seen that, you know, the rate of deforestation happening in Brazil, wildfires is the #1 driver now. So really, I think all of the discussions we've heard over the last 2 days, you know, just listening to our colleagues now, it's more apparent than ever that collaboration, I think, is necessary to work across borders, to work across sectors, to share knowledge, share experiences, share tools. That's the only way I think we'll be able to accelerate. Certainly from the World Economic Forum, we invite you all to participate in our Global Wildfire Leadership Network. We really, you know, look to you all as the experts and leaders, and you offer a lot of expertise that, you know, we would love to share with the world, and also to have you share with other leaders in this space. And I know I can maybe speak for David, that everyone is encouraged to also be part of the AI Collaborative. That's a wonderful group sharing lots of technology and innovation, and I'm sure they'd love to, you know, make sure all of you are part of it. And then Peter, maybe the FAO Wildfire Hub, which I can say was incredibly inspiring last week to be in a room with almost 200 individuals from around the world. So all of that being said, thank you again to our hosts for so generously inviting all of us. And we're very grateful for this opportunity to come together to learn from each other and hopefully figure out how we can better collaborate moving forward. So thank you. And I think we'll have closing from Lila or Nita. So thanks so much.